You know, of all the holidays we have in this country, Halloween is certainly the most bizarre. All the others are about bunnies and Santas and turkeys. There's this one holiday, probably after Christmas, it's the favorite holiday of the children. It involves death.
In the first place, I was chosen for the job because I'm from the same planet, if not the same neighborhood as Tim.
Eureka! Hello, it's Jack!
Where is my skinny-ass, scrawny-ass Halloween king to sweep me off my feet? When will it be my turn? Jack Skelligton can, get it. Jack going front and center on my Hear Me Out cake. So as you can see, I have an odd pattern of thirsting after Jack Skelligton, and that's what I bring to the table at the end of the day. Hi there, so good to see you today. Welcome if this is your first time here. I am Haunted Hippie, also known as Kylie Roseanne, also known as the Antichrist. Here to do the bidding of my father and talk about all things spooky, particularly horror movies. Today we're diving into one of the ultimate Christmas classics, The Nightmare Before Christmas. We're starting with the conceptualization, hiring Henry Selick, the song-making process, the legacy of Jack Skelligton, the initial release, and then the subsequent cult following, and then finally we'll talk about potential sequels, reboots, prequels. We'll also just dip our toes into some controversy today, so I hope you stick around. But not just today, I want you to stick around forever, so I think that you should click the subscribe button, then also click the like button and the notification bell. That way you never miss the next video. With that out of the way, we gotta jump right in. I have a lot to cover, but, and I hate to do this to you, you might want to watch my scandalous deep dive of Tim Burton's career first. Because I'm not going over that information again, okay, that would be redundant. In that video, I cover the beginning of his career at Disney, which is where A Nightmare Before Christmas was conceptualized. I also cover every scandal of his career, so I get into the controversy about the Oogie Boogie character, the title of the film, and then fights with Henry Selick. So don't think I'm skimming over that. I've done that homework. Most of the controversy didn't happen until later anyways. A lot of it doesn't really have to do with the making of the film. I'm gonna touch on a few things here and there, like Henry's thoughts on the title of the film, but for the most part, we're keeping it light today. Alright, disclaimers are lame. Let's get into it.
Growing up in Burbank, you really latch onto the seasons because you don't really get them in Southern California. You know, the only way you know it's a new season is if you walk into Save-On or Thrifty and walk down the aisle and see, Halloween decorations or Christmas decorations, and that's where you got your sense of holiday or season, because the weather certainly didn't do it.
Everything Tim Burton ever does, every movie he makes, or every interview that he sits down for, he finds a way to make it about growing up in Burbank. I also grew up near Burbank, more in the hills, and when I tell you that I also milk that shit, Los Angeles born and raised, baby, that is my personality. Go Dodgers. I'm joking. He's very convinced that growing up in the suburbs and being weird and really pale is oppression. So he's made 10 movies about it, including this one, because he's such a spooky boy. People just didn't get him. He hung Halloween decor on his Christmas tree. I actually do bet though that back in the 60s that would have been whoa, what's wrong with this kid? He loved both Halloween and Christmas. They were his two favorite holidays, so that was kind of the genesis of this story. As a kid, he always looked forward to watching the original Grinch and the original Rudolph stop motion movie, which I think is why he was so set on stop motion for Nightmare. In the early 80s at Disney, he began drawing all of these characters, and he also wrote a poem which the movie would later be based on. Around that time in 1982, he released a short called Vincent, and that got him a lot of critical acclaim, and that led him to pursuing The Nightmare Before Christmas. He pitched the concept to TV stations and to publishers, but it wasn't quite sticking anywhere because he was pretty set on stop motion. A lot of places were not feeling animation because it just was not popular at that time. In fact, if you look at the eras of Disney from 1981 to 1988, that is considered the dark ages until Little Mermaid came along in 1989. He was able to convince Disney to do a TV special with Vincent Price narrating the poem, but something got in the way. In 1984, Tim Burton released the TV special Frankenweenie, which actually got him fired from Disney. Covered that in his career deep dive as well. But The Little Mermaid kicks off the Renaissance era for Disney, where we also got Pocahontas, The Lion King, Aladdin, you get it. After the success of Little Mermaid in 1990, Burton realized that Disney still had the rights to Nightmare. He returns, he makes a deal with Disney, but because they don't really understand the project because it is quite dark and not really on brand for Disney, they put it under a new offshoot studio called Touchstone Pictures. But here's the thing, at this time, they had no script. Tim Burton had a deal and a dream and way too many other time commitments because of Batman Returns. But thankfully, in comes Henry Selick.
He just seemed really right to do it. I mean, I felt felt really comfortable with Henry, because partially because I knew him and we were friends, and I just felt like I didn't need or didn't want to take co-directing on it, just because I felt comfortable with the material, and so I just felt really extremely in good hands with Henry doing it.
Tim and Henry connected because they both went to Cal Arts, and Henry Selick had some projects there that got him some critical acclaim, some of his student films. The Nightmare Before Christmas was actually his feature-length debut, which is an insane flex. Now at this point, nobody really knows what they're doing because they have the characters and they have a poem, but there's no script and not even really a story yet. Tim had an idea of sort of designing the Grinch in reverse, someone discovering the holiday and trying to spread cheer rather than stealing it, but that was about as far as he could get on his own. And this is sort of the genesis of the movie title controversy, because I've neglected to call it by its full name, Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. But like, is it though?
Oh, it's maybe more contentious in the past. Here's how I see it. It's as if Tim had written and illustrated an incredible kids book like Dr. Seuss. It's as if that's what we had to start with. And that's a lot. It's not that the book existed or was a bestseller, but Tim's talent is that great, especially back then.
We'll revisit his feelings on this as they develop over the years, but he does always stand by the fact that Tim developed the characters, the tone, the story. Believe it or not, that does not add up to directing a complete film though, especially not stop motion, which had almost died out at this point. As Henry puts it, there was a race between stop motion and that newfangled CG animation, particularly with Jurassic Park, which some of the effects in that movie were supposed to be done with stop motion, but because of the new advances in computer-generated imagery, the stop motion just got edged out. Another good example of using stop motion for effects is in The Evil Dead. You'd be hard-pressed to think of a better example of stop motion effects in their prime than the tongue sticking out of this nasty book and everything like melting. Unfortunately, we have largely lost out on that now. Now, Nightmare was the highest budget stop motion full-length feature to date, so in a way it was kind of the first of its kind. But with a budget of $18 million, it doesn't even crack the top 10 most expensive stop motion films to date. Back then, they were trailblazing, and lucky enough to not experience really any studio intervention. Selick has compared it to his experience on James and the Giant Peach, because once Nightmare made its money back, spoilers, we'll get into that later, there were much higher expectations, and Disney was constantly breathing down his neck. If you're detached from the entertainment industry, maybe you're not aware, if someone else is funding your movie, they call the shots, down to the minutia of the wardrobe, if they feel like it. They had the luxury of being left alone on Nightmare. Another factor may have been that Toy Story came out during the middle of production on Peach, so for a while after that, stop motion had gotten the death bell, as Henry said. For a while there, stop motion was kind of fighting for its life, and I feel like even now it's underappreciated. That's a lie. I just lied. I think things are definitely changing with the resurgence of Coraline. I don't know how that has become such a huge classic in the last few years. Not complaining about it, but anyway, there's the animation history lesson you weren't expecting today. Let's get back on topic. Right, okay, so no script, no story. What do we do? Beep, beep, boop, 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 boop. Ring, ring. Danny? We need you.
All my friends were celebrating Christmas, and I was just kind of staying home playing some game in my room or annoying my brother. And I imagined them all together holding hands around a Christmas tree and singing carols and, just the kind of warm family thing in my mind. All my friends are doing this, and I'm just like, Tim comes to me with Nightmare Before Christmas, and, first thing is like, oh, God, Christmas. Here we go.
Danny has long said over the years that this is his favorite collaboration with Tim Burton, and it all started with Tim bringing him the poem. Neither of them knew where to start because neither of them had made a musical, so they just started with the songs. They also both agreed that they didn't want it to sound like Disney songs, and they didn't want it to sound like Broadway, so then what did they want? Danny tells him, okay, just explain the story to me like you're sitting kids down around a campfire. And because Tim was so animated in explaining the opening of the film, Danny started to hear This Is Halloween in his head. So then he basically rushes Tim out of his house so that he can run over and start tinkering away on the piano, because apparently he forgets music really easily if he gets distracted. And he just starts busting it out. He finishes one song, Tim comes back over and he explains the next part of the story. He'd write the next song. It took him about 3 days per song, and after about a month, they had 10 songs. Danny has cited Kurt Weill, Gilbert and Sullivan, and Cab Calloway as huge influences for this soundtrack, which is all music from the late 1800s up to the 1930s. Tim has said that Danny deserves a writing credit because of how much much of the story he crafted just with the songs alone. And Danny has said that more accurate credits would say additional lines by Tim Burton because he came up with several of the lines for the songs. Another example of the writing process, let's dive into what's this? They made a list of every new thing Jack would see, like a snowflake, a present, the lights, the tree. They did the same thing for the Kidnapping Sandy Claus song. They were like, what are all of the things that you could do to Santa? And Danny said that some weird stuff didn't make the cut. At this early stage as well, Danny said that there was no involvement from Disney. They didn't comment on the songs at all. And through this writing process, a funny thing happened.
I hadn't started out thinking it was for me, but by the end, I was getting this mindset that, if another singer gets this part, he really better watch out for like mysterious accidents, like a piano falling out of a window, a poison, cyanide somehow getting in a cup of tea. It's like these things will become extremely possible for this person. At the end of that session, I go up to him, I go, Tim, I don't know how to say this, but Jack's, these songs, and he goes, Danny, don't worry. You're doing it.
That's right. Jack's singing voice originally was not going to be Danny Elfman, but it happened kind of organically because he was so attached to the material. He's spoken in many interviews about how he was going through something very similar to Jack at that time. He felt like he was done with his band Oingo Boingo, even though he was king of his world, he was very successful, he was the leader of the group, but creatively he was feeling very stagnant, and so after scoring a couple of Tim's movies, it kind of like woke him up creatively in a way. And thank God he stuck with composing for film because he's kind of like the John Williams for weird girls. We'll talk more about Danny Elfman later, but for now, are you ready for the ultimate history lesson on making a stop motion feature?
This is Halloween, this is Halloween.
This Is Halloween was actually not the first song that they sent to Henry Selick, but rather, what's this? They shot all the musical sequences first because they didn't have a script. At the time, Danny Elfman was dating Caroline Thompson, who had also just written the script for Beetlejuice. She heard him working on all the songs, she knew them pretty well, so they were like, yeah, bring her in and she can kind of stitch all the songs together. But I don't know if you know this, stop motion is an insane process from script to screen, so let's get into it. One of the most important steps is the storyboarding. Generally with animation, there isn't coverage the way there is for live action, so you have to be anally purposeful with the shots that you capture. In this case, they hand drew the entire movie before they shot it. They need to know how to pose the characters in all 24 frames of every second of the film. So I do wonder if they ever cut that together, the hand-drawn version of this film. But now it's time for production design, and this is one of my favorite parts. I have worked in production design before. I've done a lot of set dressing and stuff, so maybe that's why. The team was inspired by Ronald Searle and Edward Gorey, and because it's Tim Burton, of course, they went with a bit of a German expressionist vibe. First, they do a scale drawing, and then those images go to set design, where a scale model is made.
If this was an actual set, it would be 4 times as large, which means this would be about 24 feet long. For space considerations, we start with something small and simple. We also have to, at this point, decide how we want it to break apart, because it can't fit on one of our stages. We build into it some specific breaks so that a piece like this could come out. We sometimes build in trap doors so that they can physically open up a section of the stage, come up, do the animation, close the trap door, and disappear.
Next, they send those pieces through the model shop, they get a paint job done, and then finally they're off to set. On set, the technical work is insane. I can't think of a better word. Many scenes needed as many as 30 lights at once. They'd also be shooting multiple scenes at a time, so they had 8 different camera crews. In order to capture the magic, cameras would have to be programmed via computer, sometimes on these big arms that would move through the sets, because there's no way that you can actually move the camera with a human hand when you're doing stop motion. Now, to get into the characters themselves, the sculpting department was only 3 to 4 people at any given time. They used oil-based clay because it was the most versatile for sculpting. All the joints, the skeletons, everything concerning the puppets was all handmade. They start with the skeleton and then an outer mold that steel armature goes into. It's ingested with a foam latex and then it's baked in an oven. Then finally it's brought to fabrication, so it gets its paint job, clothing, hair, fur, and then it's done. They made around 200 puppets for this movie, by the way. And after all that, they're not quite done yet, because then they need to do the animation tests. The most interesting thing that I learned about the character of Sally is that in her animation tests, they thought that she looked looked too unstable and too drunk initially, so they decided to make her more stable. And one of the crazier bits about the technology that I learned is that they used a beam splitter to do Zero practically. They explain it, and I still don't understand it, and that's fine. That's okay with me. So that's Sally and Zero, but what about our main man? Man of my dreams, Mr. Skinny Legend Jack Skelligton.
Because Jack Skelligton was the lead character and there was so much of him, I became the de facto Jack Skelligton actor. They don't, what do you want? And I could do some sketches. I'd try to capture what was in Tim's work, but at a certain point I got comfortable. And so some of the sequences I would act out pretty completely.
I had to dedicate an entire chapter to Jack Skelligton because I think that the work on him, as shown in the BTS, is like the best display of just the amount of work that goes into this. Jack's movements were inspired by Fred Astaire and Vincent Price, but ultimately it was his spidery frame that dictated his movements. He also was originally going to be all black, but he was too difficult to see on camera, which is how he ended up with his iconic stripes. With his character is one of the rare moments that Disney tried to intervene because they requested that they give him eyes, but they held firm on their design, and they managed to inject so much heart and soul into the character regardless. Here's his animation test. This is an example of what was sent to Disney to ensure that they could give this puppet enough personality. And for me, it's not that this is off-putting, but it is kind of strange to see Jack interacting with stuff in the real world. I'm like, oh, I want one. This is also the footage where they were testing out different walks for the character, and I'm really glad they didn't go with this one.
Oh, Zero, my only friend. How can I even show my face in this world or any other world ever again?
It was weird to see the test footage with a voice that was not Chris Sarandon because that sounded like Fred from Scooby-Doo to me. Anyways, we all know and love the look and movements that they ultimately chose for Jack. Now let's talk about shooting him. They would have 3 different animators working with 3 different Jack puppets at once because to get 1 minute of film, they had to shoot for a week. These animators, it's a different breed of patience. The fun part seems to be when an animator would act something out for Henry to see if he would like it, and then Henry acting out as Jack to kind of show them the vision of what he wanted. It's amazing how much acting goes into the work on the animator's part.
I think a lot of animators, stop motion animators and 2D animators also, are just frustrated actors and possibly shy actors like myself who, wouldn't want to get in front of the camera. And so it's kind of the nice sense to be able to let people see you, but not really see you. I get to hide behind puppets.
Another one of the most interesting aspects of Jack to me was just how many heads and faces they had for him. They estimated that they had about 400 different heads for him, and then that's not even including the separate pieces they would have for like his eyes to make him blink and stuff. There was actually a computer program they were able to use where they would plug in a song or line of dialogue or whatever, and it would show them what heads to use in what sequence to get the desired mouth movements. But if anything was out of place, if there was a problem with a single frame, they weren't able to replace just that one frame. They would have to go back and reshoot the entire sequence. Because think about it, they couldn't achieve the continuity any other way, which is horrifying actually. We'll come back to the legacy of Jack, but for now we have a very short chapter on deleted scenes.
Here's an example of a test shot that was changed to the last moment where we replaced the severed head of Mr. Tim Burton with a jack-o'-lantern.
I think that would have been such a fun Easter egg, but whatever. An entire sequence of this movie was actually removed after they shot it, which means weeks of work just rendered unnecessary. But it's during the point of the narrative where Oogie Boogie has captured Sally and Lock, Shock, and Barrel are running around and spying on them. Jack actually crawls down like a spider and scares the kids away before going in to rescue Sally and Santa. I kind of think that should have been included. It's a nice moment of payback with those rotten kids. In that moment, they're literally joking about how Jack had just been blown up. They're happy about it. And then he gets them so good by scaring them. Oh, it would have been so cathartic. Another thing I don't understand why it was removed is this sequence of Oogie Boogie dancing. They trimmed out about 17 seconds and it was just removed for timing purposes. But the movie is already only like an hour and 11 minutes. But yeah, we need to quicken up the pace. And that's it. I told you it would be a very short chapter.
I find Jack is strangely asexual in a way, even though he has a romance with Sally. But if you look at him, he's not a particularly sexy figure, but people just really go for him.
This might feel a little bit out of order, but the way this movie was made is a little bit out of order in the traditional sense. They had already shot a lot of the movie with Danny's songs before anybody else was cast. One of the sadder things I learned about casting is that Vincent Price was originally going to voice Santa Claus and even recorded the dialogue, but he was in poor health and he would pass away shortly after this, his last film ever being Edward Scissorhands that was released in 1990, and I think it was Henry on the commentary track saying that his voice had too much sadness in it that it wasn't gonna work. Now, casting Jack was interesting because they had to find someone with a voice quite similar to Danny, obviously. Chris Sarandon got a call about it from his agent. He read for them one time, and 2 days later he had it. He made 4 trips to San Francisco where they were shooting this movie over the course of 2 years, and usually he was alone, but he got to record with Catherine O'Hara one time, which he said that he preferred. And we don't hear much from Catherine O'Hara about her involvement in this movie. They didn't get a lot of interviews with her at the time, but she remains involved with it. We'll get to that later on. Chris actually had the opportunity to visit set and check it out, kind of get the vibe for what was going on. He got to see some of the finished sequences with Danny's music, which probably helped him perform, but even so, he was kind of in his head. So when Tim Burton called him up and asked if he would redo some of the lines, he was immediately down. At this point, when Tim contacted him, he was set some of the black and white assembly cut, and his children were transfixed by it, so he was thinking, even while making it, oh, like, this is gonna be something good. Ken Page, on the other hand, did not have the luxury of visiting set because the Oogie Boogie character was unfinished at that time. And how was he hired? Actually, yet again, because of Danny Elfman. He called up Ken's lawyer asking for his voice because he was very inspired by Cab Calloway.
When Mr. Oogie Boogie says there's trouble close at hand.
Ken was fantastic. He was so enthusiastic. And I'd never worked with a pro before, never worked with a real pro. So I'm used to working with people who do this and do that and do other things. And, you know, Catherine is not a professional singer and Paul's not a professional singer. And here suddenly is Ken Page. Not that I didn't love working with Catherine and Paul, but Ken comes in, he's like, wow, this guy really goes.
Santa Claus, ooh, I'm really scared. So you're the one everybody's talking about. Ha ha!
I kind of get chills, like seeing Ken Page actually perform. I don't know why it almost has a little bit more magic in it than watching the movie to me. I don't know. There are also some clips in that interview of Catherine O'Hara and Danny recording their songs together. And Catherine was nervous about singing because she's not a professional singer, but that actually was an intentional choice with her character. They didn't want someone with like a big booming vibrato kind of voice for Sally. She was a character that was much more soft-spoken and even a little bit more meek, so they needed that in her singing voice too. The order of events on how they finished the film is a little bit murky to me. I do think that they had finished recording all of the dialogue before the movie itself was finished being shot, so before it was finished, they held a preview screening, which was a little bit disastrous.
I grew up really liking those shows, but I think this will blow them away.
It's hard to say, you know, it's like I feel really good about the movie, you know, I love it, and I can, they did it's a beautiful job, you know, and so I don't know, I'll watch it every year, I don't know, my own personal holiday classic.
The preview screening ended up being kind of a total mess. There were still storyboards in the cut that they showed to children, and they tried to explain this to them, but kids aren't really gonna get that. When they gave their feedback, a lot of the kids were saying, why are there drawings in it? Danny Elfman actually remembers eavesdropping on a producer in the elevator who was saying, oh, well, all the kids hated it. So then Disney thought, okay, well, the kids are all gonna hate it, we're gonna pull the merchandise. Danny remembers that upon release, the movie seemed to disappear really quickly, and he was pretty depressed about that. In reality, the movie more than doubled its investment. It made $50 million, but the cultural impact just wasn't that big. Based on, that clip of Catherine O'Hara and others of the cast, they thought that they were part of something special. Danny shared that his daughter and her friends as well would also see cuts of the assembly, and they were really into it too. So at the time of release, when interviewed, the cast and crew was just spitballing potential immediate sequels.
Maybe Valentine's Day, because he's got Sally and there's the whole, there is a love thing there.
I mean, wouldn't you just love to spend a couple hours in Thanksgiving world?
John the Turkey King is about to get his head chopped off because it's Thanksgiving, and he decides that he doesn't want to. He wants to go off and find something else. And of course, at the end of the story, he realizes that all the turkeys make people very happy. As he's about to put his head on the chopping block, there he sees John 912 getting crowned for the next year. He realizes that life goes on.
What do you think? There's unlimited holidays, so we could do a lot of sequels. At this point, I hope that's not my next movie.
They're rightfully excited. They're just a little bit ahead of their times. The movie had a worldwide theatrical release on October 15th of 1993, and at that time it's difficult to gauge audience reaction. All we can really look at is the box office information, which wasn't anything crazy, but we do have a lot of critic reviews to look at. Starting with Roger Ebert, who gave the movie 3.5 out of 4 stars, very good. The movies can create entirely new worlds for us, but that is one of their rarest gifts. More often, directors go for realism for worlds we can recognize. One of the many pleasures of Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas is that there is not a single recognizable landscape within it. Everything looks strange and haunting. Even Santa Claus would be difficult to recognize without his red and white uniform. Working with gifted artists and designers, he has made a world here that is as completely new as the worlds we saw for the first time in films such as Metropolis, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or Star Wars. What all these films have in common is a visual richness so abundant that they deserve more than one viewing. First, go for the story, then go back just to look in the corners of the screen and appreciate the little visual surprises and inspirations that are tucked into every nook and cranny. Ah, he said with love! Todd McCarthy from Variety also gave the movie a glowing review, as well as crediting not only the creations of Tim Burton and Danny Elfman, but also the direction of Henry Selick. Love to see it. Janet Maslin does the same for the New York Times. She says that Tim Burton is now a new household name. A few weeks after its release, it got a review from Peter Travers in Rolling Stone. Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas restores originality and daring to the Halloween genre. This dazzling mix of fun and fright also explodes the notion that animation is kid stuff. And I couldn't read the rest of the article because I do not pay for Rolling Stone, but also ahead of his time, king. The point being, the critics were raving. It is such a rare occurrence when the critics are actually on the right side of history, but then it takes a while for the audience to show up. But show up eventually, they did.
The movie had come and, I won't say gone, but it had certainly come out and had its run and so forth. And I was doing a show in LA. There was sort of a goth kid who was one of the stage crew. And he came up to me and said, "Hey, is it true that you're like Oogie Boogie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" Wants to know, you know. He says, I go to this club on Saturday nights. It's this big goth club. And every night at the end of the night, to signal that it's closing time, they play the Oogie Boogie song. And I said, "Why?" Why did he? And he sort of filled me in on the popularity of the film among his group. And then I went on about finding out more information. I found that it had become this sort of underground cult classic. I had no idea.
There is a theme with us goth kids filling in these actors on What's Up. Chris Sarandon is also very well known for his roles in Child's Play, in the Fright Night films, in Princess Bride, and so he does all these convention circuits. Over the years, he noticed this steady uptick in Nightmare Before Christmas fans. He and Ken agreed that all of us goth kids are always very kind and intelligent and very sincere about our love of the film, and I know that's right. Then they started to notice all of the families that were showing out to these conventions too. At this point, we're in the early 2000s, or rather 2005, when Tim Burton and Danny Elfman are heading to Tokyo for the premiere of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. 12 years after the initial release of Nightmare Before Christmas, Danny recalls discovering an entire club based on the theme of Nightmare Before Christmas, and also seeing a ton of merchandise. So that was when Danny and Tim kind of first became aware. But a couple years before that, just 8 years after the release, that's when Disney began to fully embrace the movie, and they introduced the Holiday Mansion. Starting in 2001, from October to January, the Haunted Mansion is decked out for Nightmare Before Christmas. This footage is from my vlog last year in 2023, so this is part of the current legacy as well. Some quick fun facts: when you first get on the ride, there is a huge stack of presents, and every week for 13 weeks, a new box is open to reveal more characters. And if you look closely, the gingerbread on the dining table is different every year and made of real gingerbread. Around this time in the early 2000s, it also became much easier for fellow Nightmare fans to find each other because of the internet. I found an old blog from 2004, but I could not find the author anywhere on that page. They said, on its technical side, The Nightmare Before Christmas is a staggering achievement. If one considers the fact that it has been shot one frame at a time, it is even more amazing. This is only eclipsed by the astounding job of design that has gone into the creation of Halloween Town. From the wonderfully desolate world of the graveyard with its skeletal trees and black and white slate tombs, to its curled up loops of hills, its rickety dog-leg towers that look like upended stockings, to Oogie Boogie's domain, which is like a Las Vegas ghost train ride in iridescent glow-in-the-dark colors, the film is a work of contorted genius. Another thing that was getting huge at this time was the toys, okay? The merchandise. And I don't just mean for kids, okay? The collectors took this serious. I found a toy reviewing website that wrote this article also in 2004, 2004. I staggered my searches out for every decade since the movie's release, and I did it within a 2-year window to kind of see people's thoughts after each decade. Anyway, The Nightmare Before Christmas is a holiday favorite of mine, and when I found out that film-accurate action figures were being produced, I was excited yet worried at the same time. Worried that corners would be cut all over the place and I'd be forced to buy a shoddy product. Those fears are now completely gone as NECA delivers the goods. They saved Christmas, so to speak. They are not playing around on this website. It is a deeply thorough dive into a 2004 release of Nightmare figurines, and it's a glowing review. Fast forward another decade, in 2015, we're 22 years out from the release, I found this WordPress review. Thus, we come to a film that bears Tim Burton's name, but was only conceived and produced by Burton and directed by Henry Selick. I included that because you'll notice a pattern if you look at reviews over the years. The good journalists like to point out, like, hey, Henry Selick directed this. Something interesting that pops up here that I hadn't seen in any reviews prior is a disagreement that I suppose has emerged in the fandom. And for many years, people have wondered, is this a Halloween movie trying to be a Christmas movie? A Christmas movie trying to be a Halloween movie? Or is it something to be enjoyed in the in-between time? I'm inclined to say that this movie is a late Halloween movie, something to enjoy when you've depleted all your candy reserves, you start thinking about throwing out your jack-o'-lantern, and the department stores start to promote Christmas way too freaking early. This is a Halloween movie with a few Christmas tendencies, and above all, it's a fun, musically inclined, and darkly cute animated film. Is this a Halloween or Christmas movie? That is a point of contention I was not aware of. If you ask the people who made it, it's both. Joey gave the movie an 8 out of 10 though, so respect. Finally, we fast forward to modern day, which can be a little bit more annoyingly cynical. I couldn't find any major publications reviewing the movie in the last few years besides Screen Rant. This came out less than a month ago. The title is The Nightmare Before Christmas Review. This delightfully dark animated classic is still one of the best holiday movies ever. This one was still positive because it was written by an actual author and an actual critic. But unfortunately, on today's internet, we are also subjected to things like Reddit users who pop up right underneath Screen Rant when you're looking for a Nightmare Before Christmas review. Nightmare Before Christmas isn't even good. I mean, it's moderately okay at best. The animators did good work and Danny Elfman is a talented composer, but the story is just so incredibly underwhelming. Jack and Sally's love story is completely vapid. I've seen Hallmark movie love interest with a more solidly written relationship. I can't help but read that in an annoying voice because I just know. I believe this is part of people's modern urge to be subversive. It's such a common annoyance now that I remember in early 2023 people were saying, you better go out and watch Everything Everywhere All at Once now before people start making the enough time has passed, can we admit this movie is bad now tweets. People will be like, can I just say something crazy? Because it's the only way that people will read or pay attention to their takes. Have you tried like being interesting, maybe? My thing is like, okay, this Reddit user posted that in 2023 for what? You're not adding anything of value at this point. Maybe when the movie was like out in theaters or something, sure. But now people have Disney Plus. They can throw it on for themselves, try it out, see if they like it. Anyway, you'll mostly see nothing but positive takes about this movie, and there is no shortage of content every single year. If I were to guess, I would say at least 200 Nightmare Before Christmas reviews were posted to YouTube this year alone from channels of all different sizes, people from all different walks of life. The current legacy, oh, she's larger than life, babe. Like I said, I went to Spooky Disney last year. You can check out that vlog. It's on my second channel. It'll be linked in the master resource post in the description box. This year, I went to see Danny Elfman at the Hollywood Bowl, and that was pure magic, babes, let me tell you.
Comes to surprises in the moonlit night, I excel without ever even trying. With the slightest little effort of my ghost-like charms, I'm seen prone and give out a shriek. And I, Jack, the pumpkin king, have grown so tired of the same old thing.
He actually started doing these performances back in 2013 when his agent initially approached him about it. He walked away from his band back in 95 because a lot of that really messed up his hearing and he just wasn't interested in going back and like being in a rock band. At that time though, even though the movie was 20 years old, he had never performed these songs anywhere but the studio. So it felt like a completely fresh venture, but also kind of a daunting one.
And then it was almost a year later. Now I've actually spent months putting together all these suites and I was working on Nightmare and I called him. I said, I didn't say I was going to sing, did I? He goes, yeah, you did. I go, well, cancel that right now. He goes, it's too late. It's already advertised.
Danny had also never done theater. He explained that he had done some sort of like cabaret show, but walking out on stage in character was also something very fresh for him. Also, do we love, I've been calling them, Tim, Danny, Henry, like they're my friends. Usually I use last names. I don't know what changed today. But to this day, he still wears his special striped jacket when he's performing Jack's songs. My favorite thing that he said to the audience during his last song, like before the encore, he said, and I quote, "We're all still alive. I'm still alive. This is ridiculous," which isn't super relevant, but I guess just the fact that this music is still so culturally relevant, it's ridiculous. It's amazing. Over the years, he's gotten Ken Page and Catherine O'Hara to perform with him when he does like specialized Nightmare Before Christmas shows. They also do it with a full orchestra, and it does break my heart that I will never get to see Ken Page be part of that lineup, and some people are jealous that they'll never be part of that lineup.
Hey, have you ever actually sung any of the songs? No. Okay.
Very envious of all these guys being able to, because they do concerts.
That live Q&A was recorded in 2020, and at that time, Chris said that he had lost track of the amount of people that told him, hey, this movie got me through a really horrible time in my life. To this day, he says that at every convention he sees new merch that he's never seen before. He also shares a crazy story in that interview of a woman who showed him just how big of a fan she really was. She apparently opened her shirt to him, and he's not detailed about like how exposed she was, but to show him that she had an entire scene from the movie tattooed across her chest. And that was the first time that he ever saw a Nightmare Before Christmas tattoo on someone. And now at this point, of course, he's seen thousands. For Henry Selick, he started to notice an uptick in trick-or-treaters dressed as Nightmare characters every year on Halloween. Eventually, it got to a point where he felt comfortable inviting the kids and their parents inside to come check out his Nightmare paraphernalia that he still had. Paraphernalia, what is it? Drugs? Memorabilia. And that would just floor them, of course. That's one of my favorite things too, is seeing filmmakers that have so embraced the fans and the fandom showing off their favorite memorabilia. So let's take a look.
I have. Can you see that?
Oh.
Isn't that great? And the bats are in there, and when you wind it up on the bottom, it plays. Maybe you can hear it.
I love it. Ooh.
That's my favorite thing.
I also have some stuff from the original sets too. And I have 3 or 4 of the original heads.
It's a little hard to see, but I've got like an original Jack Skelligton up there. I can't get, dressed as Santa with a skeleton reindeer, and there's
I see it.
Deer at the head. So I've had that since the movie.
Henry also discusses in that interview the journey that Disney went on, going from, oh no, this is a Touchstone Pictures movie, to being like, of course it's Disney. And he's not joking. Not only do they have the Holiday Mansion going on every year, but since 2019, they ousted Mickey from the Mickey's Halloween Party, and now they have the Oogie Boogie Bash, a Disney Halloween party. It's a party and trick-or-treating event. We actually have friends who take their daughter every year. It's now a family tradition for a lot of people. And last time I'll bring this up, we went to Disney in October. The amount of people that we saw dressed up as Sally was staggering, and there were a fair amount of Jacks as well. The legacy of Jack alone is nuts. I've linked his Wikipedia page just if you want to do a deep dive on him on your own, because I don't have time to get into all of that. Okay, he showed up in a bunch of video games with Chris Sarandon reprising his role in a couple of them, and then the amount of toys and stuff, they don't even get into it on the Wikipedia page, okay? They said your human mind cannot wrap around all of that. But one thing I'd be remiss if I did not mention is when Home Depot unveiled their 13-foot tall Jack Skelligton. I'm actually lucky enough to have a fanatic in my neighborhood. They go all out with the Haunted Mansion theme for Halloween, and they put up their giant Jack every single year, but only for Halloween. They don't leave him up for Christmas. So, fake fan alert. I bring this up because I just want you to think for a second, like, can you think of another character off the top of your head that has a 13-foot decorative statue made out of them? down. Because I can't. Okay, that's called cultural impact. Speaking of, let's talk about the title for the last time today and get Henry's final thoughts on it. Again, like I said, he'll still say to this day, my team made this movie. Tim Burton was not even in the same city, and when they did have the rare check-in, there wasn't a lot of input because Tim just was loving everything they were doing.
You know, it's his movie in a major creative way, but we made it, and we made all the pieces fit. We brought these characters to life. Jack Skelligton, I acted him out for the animators. You know, you take this beard and my hair away, and I'm Jack Skelligton.
He did say that for a time after the movie was released, he would often correct people and be a little huffy about it. But once Coraline came around, that started to happen less frequently, and people were more familiar with his game. It was probably a large reason why Jordan Peele approached him for Wendell and Wild, and Henry says that Jordan was very knowledgeable on his career. Over the years, he has spitballed different reasons why they slapped Tim Burton's name on it. That decision, I think, was made by some weird executive. Like, I don't think we'll ever really know. In this interview, he said, oh, I don't know, maybe people would have confused it with Nightmare on Elm Street or something. For the most part, people are very aware these days, and if they're not, they are very quick to be corrected. I'm off of Twitter now, but in my last months there, I did have a viral tweet correcting somebody. Sorry, Queen, you probably meant well, but I ride for Henry Selick. That's enough of that, though. I am done talking about that controversy forever now. I'm free. The last segment of this chapter concerns potential continuation. I don't want to show the clip because it makes me too sad now, but God. I don't think I'm gonna cry, but I might get a little bit choked up. Ken Page would say that he never left the role. He said, Oogie Boogie could always rise from the ashes, like he'd be down to do a sequel or a prequel. The same thing happened when I did my deep dive on Scream 4 when I had to talk about Wes Craven passing away. Oh my god. If you're unaware, Ken Page passed away at age 70 on September 30th of, oh my god. I don't even know him or his career like that. It's just like sad. He was too young. He was only 70. He just was someone that was very impassioned about his role in the movie and embraced the fandom, and like that's a special person, you know? Ah, the tears are falling. Fuck. I took a break, but it's literally just like when I talk about it, I can't help it. It doesn't matter if I like take a break and collect myself. So anyway, Chris Sarandon also agreed that he would love to reprise his role. He seemed to be a little bit more into the idea of a prequel, but he never got the inkling that any kind of continuation would ever happen.
I've done sequels, I've done other things, I've done reboots, I've done all that shit, right? I don't want that to happen to this, Burton said. He then added, quote, it's nice that people are maybe interested in another one, but I'm not. I feel like that old guy who owns a little piece of property and won't sell to the big power plant that wants to take my land. To anyone holding out for some kind of nightmare sequel, sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
I'm gonna consider that the nail in the coffin for Nightmare Before Christmas. For now. You have to understand how little faith I have in Disney. I actually openly despise them unless they want to fund one of my movies, in which case I'm a Disney adult. I love you. But remember when Steven Hillenburg passed away and Nickelodeon was like, okay, right, so let's immediately disrespect this dead man's wishes. I feel like that's going to be Disney before Tim is even in the ground. He'll be watching from his deathbed as they create some soulless, empty reboot. Wow, what a horrible note to end the deep dive on. How about instead I rank the songs from the movie? I actually am not much of a musical theater girly, but I am starting to catch the bug. My eyelashes are like still wet. That being said, there are only 4 songs in this movie that matter to me, so I will only be ranking those. And this might be shocking, but in my number 4 spot, we have This Is Halloween. Yes, I know, powerful, powerful music. I can't deny that. Everyone hail to the pumpkin song, etc., etc. But I prefer the songs that are carried by Danny, and he doesn't even sing in that one. It's no wonder that the best part of that song is when he emerges from the fountain in all his pumpkin king glory. And that is the most streamed song from the soundtrack of Nightmare Before Christmas with over 174 million streams. My number 3 song would be Oogie Boogie's song, and that's for obvious reasons. I don't need to explain myself. It's also the 3rd most streamed from the movie with 53 million streams. My second choice is Jack's Lament. Jack's Lament is just such a journey. There's a lot going on. First of all, I, Jack, the Pumpkin King, inject it into my plasma. I want it to attach itself to the proteins of my DNA. It's also so real, like he's depressed, he's unmotivated. You gotta shake things up sometimes. That is the 4th most streamed song with over 40 million streams. I'm a little bit surprised about that because the quality of that song, are we joking? And my personal number 1 song from this film, though there's really no debate, of course, course, it would be, what's this? They've got a little tree. How queer. This looks like fun. This looks like fun. Could it be I got my wish? It's so unique. It's downright adorable. I love this song so much. If This Is Halloween wasn't on a million different Halloween playlists, then I think that What's This would have the most play, hands down. It has over 79 million streams, certified banger, best vibes all around. Yeah. That is my limited Nightmare Before Christmas song ranking. Feel free to draw blood in the comments down below though. Also let me know your favorite thing that you learned today. Don't be shy in the comments. Let's continue the discussion. I had a blast with this deep dive. My next deep dive upcoming in January is on Misery, and I would love to do a deep dive on Coraline in the future. Maybe that'll be my February deep dive, but we do have Valentine's Day that month, so maybe not. Let me know your thoughts. I am open to requests. In the meantime, you can check out all the other content on this channel. There are lots of deep dives like this, and then also just reviews and rankings and all that fun stuff. My second channel is where I talk about physical media, or I post travel content every week. I also have a Patreon with tons of bonus content every week depending on which tier you sign up for. If you want to continue this deep dive for yourself, like I said, I have linked my master resource page down below, but I think I did a pretty thorough job. And you can also supplement this viewing experience with my deep dive on Tim Burton's career if you want the more juicy, scandalous stuff. More than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!